Good morning. Welcome to our beautiful first time it's clear out there gathering this morning. So if I look out and I see you all looking that way, no judgment. Please feel free to do. I know this for a fact that you can look somewhere else and still pay attention, so I will trust you to be doing that. My name is Aaron Stritzel. I'm the pastor here at Trinity United Methodist Church, where we strive to embody God's love and create God's beloved community in this world. First, just a couple of quick announcements. We are doing family worship the first Sunday of every month. Today we are also doing a noisy offering. So if you have change, at some point down the line, we're going to invite you to dump them in. And if you do not, this is our first time doing it, so it's no judgment. So just remember to do it next month and double up. So the first Sunday in April we'll also be doing that. So the kids will be collecting that. While kids are invited to be with us in worship the entire time, there's also a nursery right over here. And they're welcome to go there at any point. Bathrooms are out down this hall to the right over there. And if you pull out your bulletin, I'm going to talk briefly about this prayer. And for those of you who do not know, our Trinity is a part of the United Methodist Church. So we're really a global denomination, and we had a kind of a big gathering this past weekend. A lot of discussions were happening. We're going to have a little bit of an overview. Marie, who's a part of this community, is one of the lay delegates, so was actually there at that conference. So she's going to share a little bit of what happened, as well as opportunity to ask any questions. But to give you a concise view, there was some votes casted, and the global church decided, not by much, but by about a 53% over 47% margin, to not give our LGBTQIA siblings full inclusion in church. Boo. What that means, we don't yet fully know for all churches. But this church, this community, will remain committed to being an inclusive and safe and affirming place.
Hallelujah.
And I am grateful, just as a straight white male, to be appointed to a church where people did hard work to get this community here. Some of you are here today. So I want to thank you for that, because it means a lot. You guys paved the way to allow this space to be here. So as we read this, just really briefly, if you notice, if you're not familiar with the terminology, LGBTQIA can seem like a mouthful. That just stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and the A can mean asexual or allied, depending. So I want to invite you to rise in body or spirit as we join together in a prayer out loud, as a prayer of, in many ways, solidarity, but also a prayer for this community. May we join in prayer. Let us pray. God of inclusion, we seek forgiveness for the ways the church has excluded or hurt our LGBTQIA siblings. In light of the General Conference vote this past week, we seek to make space and walk alongside of those who are hurting from the news. Scripture tells us to mourn with those who mourn and weep with those who weep. This morning we mourn, we grieve, and we resolve to continue to walk the path towards greater inclusion and justice for all of humanity and creation. Amen. I invite you to turn to your black hymnals. It's a misprint on there. To turn to page 2169 as we sing together, God, how can we forgive?
And we're going to sing verses 1, 2, 3, and then 1 again.
invite you to have a seat. Thank you for joining us in that song. This time I'm going to invite the Waltons to come on up. We are doing kind of a different ritual to kind of carry on the rhythms from our last space, as we are in a new space, in an interim space. Part of that is we're passing around these eternal flame here. We're inviting people to take it home every week, and what we'll be inviting people to do is to kind of reflect on the week with the candle. And so we wanted to invite Susie and Matt to share with us a little bit about their reflections this past week.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, my noticings this week.
You need to talk right now.
Oh, sorry. There we go. My noticings this week with the candle. So I've been fighting off this kind of cold. It's made sleeping at night a little bit difficult. I've been waking up a bunch of times throughout the night. And my schedule has me up in the morning before the sun comes up. So I would wake up and sneak out of the bedroom, and I would see the candle lit on the dining room table and showing a circle of light kind of on the ceiling. And it was just a really calming, comfortable, warm welcome into the day while I was kind of feeling not so great and pretty crummy fighting off this cold. And it was just a really nice way to reflect and start my day on a good foot, even though it's been a little bit of a struggle.
And I guess our house right now, it might be a little bit of a chaos. Oh yes, our house is maybe a little bit chaotic right now as we're getting ready for baby to come and organizing our space and all of that. And so it's been really nice while maybe being anxious or stressed out about our space, just like every time going through the dining room, seeing the candle in the middle of the table, it just kind of invited you to pause and just have a little sense of calm in the middle of this chaos of just everything is okay. and it was really nice, especially thinking about how sometimes you're with life gets crazy and you grow blind sometimes to the pile of clutter on the side table or your dining room table or your entire house, and you just don't see it anymore because it's just kind of part of life. And having this candle and this extra responsibility, it didn't just sort of float into the background as something that was just there all the time. It really drew your attention because make sure that it's still lit and is it going to last overnight? And so it was something that just kind of was something to pay attention to, and that was really nice to have those moments of calm. And also then just within that calm space, it helped me, especially this week with all the different headlines in this country, in the world, and in our church, helping me get perspective of thinking about within all of that crazy chaos, there's this something much bigger and in this eternal flame that's going on, and just trying to get some sense of peace in this really chaotic world and time that we live in. So that was just a really nice moment to have calm. And Christina's up next. Get out your change.
Yep.
Speaking of peace, this is not going to be very peaceful, but it's going to be fun. So what we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we are doing something called a noisy offering. So I'm going to have all the kids come up front, and I'm going to give them these little metal pails that are so cute and so tiny. I love them. And they are going to collect spare change from you and then dump it in this big Ziploc bag I have. And we are going to choose what we want to donate the change towards following the offering. And we're going to continue to do this on Family Worship Sundays, first Sunday of every month. So, kids, let's get the pails.
They're on. All right, go. Whoever can tell us the most tails. Yeah, I'm all right, let's see how it goes. There you go.
Let's make it more fun. Let's put a clock on it. Let's do 30 seconds. Yeah. 30, 29, 28, 27. Raise your hand if you have change. 26, 25, 24. I definitely saw that coming and I didn't do anything about it.
Super here.
22. Any more? Yep. Got more? Okay. Okay, we're skipping seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Go, go, go. Get it in, get it in. 3, 2, 1. 1, 5. All right, and now for a more peaceful part of the service, we are going to turn to our bulletins and read the Lord's Prayer together. I'm going to try to do this from memory since I'm a church kid and I don't have a bulletin. All right. Giver of life, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And all the kids are going to come back with me into the nursery. Yes, again.
Oh, here, I have a lucky quarter. It's heads. There you are. So those buckets were my doing, so they were too small, I know. We'll be getting a little bit bigger ones in the future. But I'm excited because we're looking to work with the kids and picking out where they want to give it. So that offering is kind of a special offering for them, an ongoing thing. So in the future, I'm sure they'll be making an announcement of that decision, but that might be a couple months from now. But it's a special thing for them. At this time, kids are back there. They're still going to be a part of our worship service. They're doing something that they're going to come back up later and kind of present to us as part of the service. But at this time, I want to invite Marie, if she would come up. And Marie is one of the lay delegates from our conference. And she's going to share a little bit about what happened, why, and also answer a few of the questions. So would you give Marie a warm welcome as she comes? Also, just wanted to say thanks on behalf of this church, but also the wider community. I know there's a lot of emotions and time and energy that went into that, so we appreciate that.
Hey, it's good to be here this morning. I'm going to sit in that stool, if that's okay. And we can all just gaze out at the beauty of this day. Part of my sort of preparation for this general conference, special session, I'm realizing should have included more discussions here or with folks who didn't spend the last 3 years working towards it. So there's some blind spots. So I'll go through what I think are the what and the why and the now what. But then if there's time, I'll have some questions. Because it's hard to know what's missing for me. So as Pastor Aaron said, the traditional plan passed at the special session by a small margin. And in that rejected an institutional compromise that would have provided space for churches like ours and conferences like ours that welcome gay clergy and that allow clergy to or celebrate that clergy perform gay weddings, and would also have allowed other places to deny that right to clergy. So not only was it, I feel like, a step backward for the church, it was a rejection of sort of the leadership of the bishops who supported that one church institutional compromise, and of and I think a punishment for those of us who have been living biblical obedience in our disobedience to the discipline. As a delegate, there were some hopeful moments. That most of the leadership supported that one church plan, the bishops and a lot of the general agencies that steward a lot of the work of our church supported the one church plan. And the worship leader was this wonderful man. I don't actually know his sexuality, but he worked to have completely gender-inclusive language in all of the worship songs. And all of the liturgies included what I felt were heartfelt calls to inclusion for the church. So the people that were in charge, that were running this event, were not in agreement with the traditional plan. After we had, as a committee on the second day, after we had made clear that we were probably headed towards approving the traditional plan, the body agreed to hear the simple plan, which you might have heard of before. That was the plan that the Queer Clergy Caucus put forward. So it was not a progressive plan because it didn't create inclusive churches everywhere, but it was the leadership of the queer clergy who brought forward that simple plan, and the body agreed to hear debate on that. And so that was a hopeful moment for me because it showed not an absolute rejection of the way that we embody community here. And I think, part of my experience, we have one lay delegate from our Washington State and Northern Idaho, so that's me. And we have one clergy, and that's Mary Hike, a district superintendent from Seven Rivers. And she was the only one I ever entertained the idea that the traditional plan might pass with, because together in this sort of partnership that we built, we couldn't imagine the traditional plan passing and it not being a catalyst for inclusive church everywhere. So I think there's hope in that this might be something, there might be something brewing. God's not done with us yet. The why, I think for me, I could talk about the why forever. So we should do drinks sometime if you have more questions. But there are absolutely, there's been long-standing abuse of power in our church from the conservative, I think a lot of white men in the Southeast who are afraid of losing control. So when they see us ordaining gay clergy, celebrating gay weddings and the fullness and richness of God's creation, they get angry. And that's what we have with the traditional plan, is an angry, punishing, punitive response. And they have long exploited the imbalance of resources in our church. So really organized Africa and Russia and the conservative South as a voting bloc that was impenetrable, and that quite honestly probably has been impenetrable for a really long time. The institution has been holding a wall, not letting something like this happen, as we have become even more and more joyfully disobedient in electing a gay bishop a few years ago, right? So I think in my conversation with Africans, trying to convince them the traditional plan would be harmful to our community of church together, us, me, and them, in love, they really felt that they couldn't continue in ministry with the United Methodist Church having a gay bishop. So that's where I again go back to that hope that this is a catalyst, that I don't have any regrets for voting for Bishop Karen Olavito, who serves as the first out gay bishop. And that as a church, we're trying to span these cultures where we've had legal marriage for a few years here, and that fight was long, but across Africa and across Russia, marriage isn't legal. These conversations aren't happening in the same way, and so don't hear a blaming of cultures that don't affirm gay marriage, but an acknowledgement that the conversation is different in different contexts. I don't know. I think that's the most interesting part I had for why. And then now what? What's kind of interesting is that in my discussions with the most conservative faction that started organizing after General Conference 2016, they just kept saying, our people are angry. Our people are angry. We have to do something. And golly, I don't think God is calling us to act out of anger. But what I think has happened is that moderate people who before could sort of ignore that the discipline denies these rights to gay people and allies, that they no longer can ignore it. They have to acknowledge the fact that we are in a homophobic church. And I think that anger I think that anger could be put to good use in this moment to possibly mobilize either for something new or for something to change within our structure to allow for more inclusive church in more places. Beyond that, the Judicial Council has actually already ruled, that's our main governing body that could sort of negate the legislation that was passed. They've already said that some of the legislation should be cast out, should be thrown out because of the Constitution. So the worst parts of the legislation that was passed will be thrown out probably in April, and we'll have a better idea what's before us. What remains is still mandatory penalties for clergy who perform gay weddings, and a lot about how district superintendents and bishops handle complaints against clergy for gay weddings or for being gay. So, yeah, there's still a lot of bad to the legislation, but the worst will be thrown out. And here in the West, because we are a reconciling church in a reconciling congregation in a reconciling jurisdiction, the entire West is reconciling. So for here, it means very little to our ministry that we've built up this institution of fully inclusive leadership is, I think, a beacon of light for the rest of the church right now. And we'll be able to offer refuge for clergy who want to move if they feel persecuted in their area. Some clergy might not want to move. They have built up their own communities and congregations and flocks where they are. But what's kind of fun for Trinity as a clear opening, a clear appointment, is we might receive someone seeking refuge in the new year. And across the West, that will be happening. We'll also be looking to resource those who want to stay and maintain full inclusion where they are. And they'll be going through that complaint process I mentioned. And so as folks who have dealt with complaints against clergy before, we're well positioned to provide resources to those clergy and leadership who want to disobey. We're mobilizing for 2020. I think there's a chance after we know what is constitutional in the final Judicial Council decision, there's a chance to work for reorganization in a different way, like I said, so we can be church together across contexts, possibly not the United Methodist Church, but affiliated church. Autonomous affiliated is the institutional language we use. And yeah, and continue to embody God's kingdom as fully inclusive people here is an important part of that. Are there questions? Yeah.
So they're going to allow us still to be reconciling?
Yeah. So Victoria asked if they'll allow us to still be reconciling. And what I'd say is the global church is not, but the people who are in charge of enforcing that here are certainly fully inclusive. So they're not even just allowing us to be fully inclusive or reconciling here. They're celebrating it and calling for it. Yeah. Any other?
So we're openly rejecting these policies, like joyfully rejecting them. So if Aaron were to perform a same-sex marriage, he would not be fired for a year?
No, that's a good question, Randy. He asked if Pastor Aaron were to perform a same-sex wedding here, whether or not that mandatory penalty of being fired for a year would apply. And that's not the case here because of who is in leadership here. If Pastor Aaron, say Pastor Aaron was moving in the next year. We know Pastor Aaron's moving to Colorado, where they are also fully inclusive, where the gay bishop resides, actually. But if Pastor Aaron were moving to Louisiana, that would not be the case. It would be a risk to ministry there. And so that's who we need to provide resources to, as those who have been living this joyful disobedience before. Yeah.
So, Marie, the global church then can't come in and dictate what we do, only our Pacific Northwest Conference can? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so Terry asks whether the global church can come in and tell us what to do. And that's what they were trying to do in this legislation. The legislation includes 3 petitions that were about Episcopal obedience, because it ultimately resides here with our Bishop Elaine, who Walker's mom, and so the legislation was trying to build up a system of removing bishops that do not enforce these rules, and those 3 petitions were already ruled unconstitutional, and we expect they will be again. So unless that changes right now, we just answer to Bishop Elaine, who, along with the rest of the Western jurisdiction bishops, has said, we will disobey, we will be fully inclusive. And for the time being, they say we're sticking around. You can't get rid of us. Which is part of the fun. Yeah.
And also be in the pride parade and the booths.
Oh, yeah. We can definitely be in the parade. I'd be hurt if we didn't. Yeah, Andrea.
Who is it that rules on those petitions then? And has that body changed at all so that there might be more conservative people making that decision?
The question is who rules on those petitions. It's the Judicial Council. We're set up like our own federal government with a legislative, a judicial, and a executive branch. And so the bishops are the executives. The body of General Conference is the legislative, which is what just happened. And then the Judicial Council is what will give the final word on constitutionality. And it hasn't changed since those decisions were announced. Some of them were announced right before General Conference. However, it's a global body that has sometimes been unpredictable. So I'm really hopeful they'll maintain their decisions, but until April, it's sort of unclear. Good. Is that enough? Sorry.
Yeah. We can do one more, but I wanted to. This doesn't actually go into effect technically till January 2020, anyways.
Yes,
so there's time. No one's going to enforce anything right now, right? There's time for us to figure out a lot more.
Right. Yes. Good.
Anyway, my question I was wondering what the statistics are in the Seattle area in regards to other Methodist churches. Are they also inclusive, or are they not? Or
yeah, I would say so. The question is about Seattle and how inclusive churches are here. I think there are churches with more diversity than Trinity as far as inclusivity, but I think for the most part, churches and especially clergy are very inclusive here. So, yeah, is that?
Well, I mean, so we tend to, Trinity tends to be rather unique.
Yeah, I think for our lack of political opinion diversity here, I think we're pretty unique. I think because it seems like we're all on the same page. Not that I say that out loud, someone's going to be like, excuse me, but I think here you have embodied community as fully inclusive for longer than many of the churches here. So that means on this road to full inclusion, on the understanding of LGBTQIA issues, Trinity is at the forefront in Seattle, I would say. But across the Seattle churches, especially in leadership, you'll find a fully inclusive clergy, lots of gay clergy, and most churches would welcome full inclusion, or would fight for full inclusion, I should say.
Most of the churches are reconciling churches in Seattle.
The coalition that works on the Pride Parade is made up of many different churches from Seattle. So
I hear some concern about the local church coming in and telling the local churches what to do. From what I've been able to read in perspective is that they're not trying to tell you what to do, they're telling you what not to do.
That's an interesting perspective.
Much as the Ten Commandments.
Cliff says they're not trying to tell us what not to do. That's definitely up for debate. Just to close, the now what here at Trinity, I'd love to start conversations about how our apportionment dollars could be redirected from the general church to other ministries. And so that'll be within ministry council and financial team, or others who are in charge of that. And I think there's something to be said as a fully inclusive congregation with radical hospitality happening every week. We have had our identity co-opted by another body that refuses to follow Jesus' lead. And so Trinity is uniquely positioned to show others how, in the face of those who want to exclude, we can embody God's beloved community. We can recognize our call to follow Jesus. So thank you for that leadership and for our continued work together.
Thank you, Marie. It's going to get worked out in the meantime. Trinity isn't unique in that we're among the minority as far as LGBT inclusive churches. If you have more questions, you can talk to Marie after the service. We'll be updating. There's things going on. And there's still a lot of questions a lot of people will have about that. The biggest thing is my heart goes out to those that are in other areas of the country that don't have a safe place like Trinity. And so in light of that, and with that in mind, the choir is going to sing a very special song here in a moment. It's A Child of God. How many of you guys have heard of that song before, A Child of God? I invite you to just let these words flow over you. Underneath them is this idea that God's love encompasses and includes every single human. And I don't think that anyone is excluded from that love. So I want to invite the choir to come on up.
I am a child, I am
want to say, and that is there's a lot of great articles and resources online to find out more information about what's going on. But I also, I printed out, this is a letter from the bishop, and I printed out about 25 copies back at our info center. So if you want to know kind of what's happening from the voice of one of the most pivotal leaders, you'll find that back there for your convenience. So today, as a transition, we're beginning a new sermon series. The sermon series is called The Inward Journey, and it's based off of what is called the Enneagram. How many of you have ever heard of the Enneagram before? Raise your hand so I get a little bit of a pulse. Okay, so a few of you guys. Is that bright enough to see? Not really? What if I move it that way? Does that help? Really bad. Okay. Gosh, I don't know. I thought about that, but I'm like, okay. So, that's not going to do anything. Okay. Well, we'll roll with it. We'll see what we can do with that. We got to figure out something about the lighting. There is a handout too, as well, in your bulletin. Thank you guys for pulling that out, so you can kind of see it more. But I'm going to point to this a little bit. I apologize, it's dark. We're going to be figuring out what to do with the lighting and the backlighting, especially when the choir is up here, so they're not all silhouetted. Although then you get a beautiful view as well. So today, beginning a new sermon series for Lent. If you know, it's not quite Lent yet. Lent starts actually this week. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. Lent is the 40 days leading up to Easter. It's reflective, really, of the 40 days Jesus spent in the wilderness, fasting, praying, doing some deep inner work, self-examination, temptation, before he began what some people call his public ministry. And so a couple of invitations. First of all, oftentimes for Lent, people do something strange. Anybody know what it is? Fast. Give up things. So there's an invitation to do that. It doesn't make you more spiritual if you do, or less spiritual if you don't. But it is an invitation, perhaps, to put aside something for a while. Some people do some sort of food, chocolate or whatever. Others find maybe you integrate an unhealthy habit that you're like, I would like to carve that out. So maybe I binge watch Netflix a little bit too often, or I find myself on social media too much, and maybe for the next 40 days I'll cut that off. So that's an invitation, as well as an invitation to join us for a special Ash Wednesday service this Wednesday. We're partnering with, and gracefully been invited to partner with, Woodland Park United Methodist Church, which is located up on Finney Ridge. It's just a few miles from here. The bus route gets you most of the way there. It starts at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. If you need transportation, please, if you'd like to be involved, we'd like to find a way for you to get there. Come talk to me afterwards. If you are willing to give transportation, please. And anybody from the Landmark will find a way. If you guys would like to, I'll connect with you guys afterwards. But it will be a short service for about an hour on Wednesday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's for Ash Wednesday. Yes?
The bulletin says 7:30.
It does. It lies. Sorry about that. I forgot to exit out. Thank you for noting that. Originally it was 7:30, and then they changed it this past week. They have a special service every Wednesday that normally starts at 7:30. So 7 o'clock. Please change that from the bulletin as you do. So really, this morning is an introduction to the Enneagram. And then what we're going to do in the next weeks is we're going to talk about each type and go around. But today is really answering two questions. First, why the Enneagram? And second, what is the Enneagram? I think most people want to become more loving, compassionate, justice-oriented people, right? Right? Yes, thank you. One of the ways, I think there's a lot of different ways we do that, but one of the ways that we become more loving, compassionate, and justice-oriented is through self-knowledge and spiritual formation, becoming aware of ourselves. In fact, in a book that's become really popular called The Imitation of Christ, the author, Thomas Kempis, says this: "A humble self-knowledge is a surer way to God than a search after deep learning." And it's from that we're kind of on a humble self-knowledge. Have you ever met somebody that can quote the scripture inside and out, but yet don't seem to be very loving, compassionate people. So you can be extremely knowledgeable. In fact, we see this. Jesus constantly butts up against those kinds of people. What self-knowledge does is actually, as Jesus says, it takes for you from looking at the speck in other people's eyes to noticing the log in your own eye, right? Once you begin to become aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, and your shadows, you actually become more humble in that. In Colossians 3:12, it says, "As God's chosen ones, holy, beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience." One of the images that I think is most reflective and most helpful for me is an image of an iceberg. And I'll kind of shine this around. And this one's actually backlit, so you can kind of see. This is an iceberg here. And I think in many ways we're like icebergs. We see part of each other and ourselves, but it's the surface part. There's a lot of things hidden deep underneath there, below the waters. Does that make sense? And so part of the gift of the Enneagram, as in other things, it's not the end-all be-all, but it begins to allow us to see what's underneath those waters a little bit more. So this is one of those things, it's not really a personality test where you take and it's like, man, you're amazing at this and this and this, go! It's one of those that begins to shine light on some of the things you might not know are there, or might have known but kind of buried. So it's not for the weak or the faint-hearted, but it's one of those that is meant to bring these things to the surface. So what is the Enneagram? It's really been formed over hundreds and hundreds of years, passed down like many things orally. It kind of predates Christianity, actually. Many of the early church Christian fathers, desert fathers and mothers, some of them, not many, some of them used it as a tool for spiritual formation. I think people began to see, oh, people are wired differently. There's different motivations people come from. People act differently. People have different struggles. In fact, some of the deadly sins are kind of taken from here, and we'll get into that a little bit as we go along. Some people will say, well, I hate personalities because they put me in a box. So everybody's looking, what type are you? If you look at this, first of all, Ennea, if you divide this in half, Ennea just means 9. Gram comes from the word gramma, which means points or types. And so the idea is it's a cyclical, meaning whole. And some people from the Judeo-Christian tradition especially will say this represents the face of God. That God is whole and a piece of all of this. And as we'll come back to it at the very end, this idea that actually each one of us reflect the divine in different ways based upon this. Also, as we begin, one of the most important things to understand about the Enneagram is it begins to section off different types of people. But you have all types within you. This is one of the things I love, is you have all types. You start there. You have a piece of 9, just like you have a piece of 2, just like you have a piece of 5. So when we go over and we start talking about these things, there'll be a piece of it that you'll resonate with, even if it's not your dominant type. So what people say about the Enneagram is we come into the world and very early on, when we're very young, we begin to learn to cope with things. And what happens is we kind of gravitate towards a specific way of being in the world. And what the Enneagram is meant to do is, really, it's not to put you in a box as much as it is to show you the box that you kind of gotten yourself in, your tendencies, and as through self-awareness and sometimes through some spiritual practices to get yourself out of that box a little bit more, to become aware of that. So it's this idea underlying it that we're not all the same. I grew up in a church tradition that really, ever heard of the song, read your Bible, pray every day, and you'll grow, grow, grow? Anybody? No? Whoa, okay. So, underlying that, well then, yeah, throw that one out. That doesn't work. So, underlying a lot of this is that if you read your Bible for 10 minutes and then you pray for 10 minutes, then that's spiritual formation. And what I've come to believe is like everything we do is spiritual formation. And while we might be headed in a similar way, how we get there is very different. Right? Some of our strengths are formed differently, and so that's part of it. So at this time, I'm actually going to invite Christina to come up as an exercise of reflecting the differences between each of us as they make their way up here. They did a little exercise back over here, and I think did they do the one we talked about? They drew. I'm going to let Christina introduce it so I don't talk and then miss something.
we drew two things. Oh, I left mine back there. That's unfortunate. I drew Trader Joe's. It was great. So our first drawing, we drew a man walking a dog to the store. Can everyone show your drawings of the man walking a dog to the store? So we see, let's see, Emmeline's over here has, is that a moon?
Yes.
Yes, so he's walking the dog at night. And is the dog in the stroller? No, that's a sidewalk. Okay. And, looks like a stroller. It's a see-through
No,
sidewalk.
dog.
Oh,
It's a rare dog.
It's a rare see-through dog. All right, Micah, what do we have? Okay, same thing, sidewalk to the food store. I like it. You don't see many sidewalks to the store anymore. All right, Liam, let's see. Hold it up high, hold it up high. With two hands. Store, nice. With the nice sun. All right. Abby, awesome. I like the sidewalk in the street. Like it. Store, oh, convenience. That is what it's called. And then Mia, show it up there. Oh, I like the blue hair and the dog. I like it. Second picture that we drew was a rocket ship in space. These look a little more similar. So Emmeline's has some nice stars. We can see the Earth, and she okay. She drew it after one of the toddler's toy medical things that's supposed to look like a shot. So she drew the rocket ship to look like the little thing, and I think she's grabbing it right now. So you can see the nice little Earth, and it's pretty cool. Micah has a goldfish in his rocket ship, or outside the rocket ship. And then Liam, nice, I see the Earth down there, hold it up high. He's got purple and orange rocket ship. Oh, he also drew a goldfish. Nice. You did not finish your drawing. See? Yeah. Yeah. See where she got her inspiration from? And it squeaks. All right. And then Abby has complete nothingness, which might be more accurate in space than we realize. And then Mia, let's see what you got. Is that like a space station? I can't see from here. Something like a space station.
What is it? It's a dog.
But
Wait, they're both dogs.
There are dogs in the spaceship. So we just drew all these. I gave them all the same thing. I kept telling them the same thing, rocket ship in space or a man walking a dog to the store. And they all drew it in a way that communicated their creativity and in a way that was unique to them. Even though they all got the same prompt, they all drew it differently in a way that reflected their personality and everything. So that is what our activity was about.
Thank you guys. Good job.
Thank you guys. One of the things that I love most about the idea of kids ministry is encouraging creativity. Because I think at some point we're all born creative and we lose that often because we're supposed to be uniform. We're supposed to color within the lines. We're supposed to be something, and you find you bump outside of that you kind of get disciplined. Like, hey, no, get back over here. And so one of this, the central point we're trying to make is that we're all different. I mean, we're all connected. We all have all parts, but we all have different paths, different strengths, different weaknesses. And so I'm going to take the next few moments to help us. Does anybody know their type, by the way? Okay, a few of us. So I'm going to introduce this idea. One of the first things you're supposed to do is begin to find what type you are. What is your Enneagram type? Again, you have all types. There's 9 different things. Some people number them. These are different names. You want to come up here afterwards. Again, I think you have it in your bulletin there, although it might not have all the names. But these are just ways of highlighting it. The numbers work better because they're neutral. They're just 1 through 9. It's not the higher you get, the better you are. They're not diving scores or anything, or golf scores opposite, So it's just a matter of finding which one you most resonate with. There's a number of ways you can do that. You can go online and look, research each type and kind of read about their descriptions. You can find somebody who's been trained in a narrative tradition that looks at your actual story, your upbringing, your childhood, trying to get at really what motivates you as a person. You can also take some tests online. The caution with tests is that oftentimes they're only about 50 to 60% accurate. because which isn't very good. And it can lead you astray like it did me early on. And the reason is because unlike the Myers-Briggs, which is more testing for cognitive, like how do I learn and make decisions, this is really how am I motivated? So two people can have same motivations, but reflect that differently. Does that make sense? And so it's hard to test for your motivation. So it's really meant to be a self-exploration. Like, what am I motivated by? So instead of looking at it and be like, which one am I? Look at it as, okay, this is a journey. How do I understand myself? What do I resonate with the most? Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to go through another way of beginning to hone your type is through something called triads. There's 9 types. So you can group 3 together, 3 together, 3 together. So I'm going to go through really briefly to talk about 3 different groups of triads to kind of help us navigate towards one maybe that we think we're more like. So the first, if you notice these central figures here, if you can see there's a kind of a person right here, there's a heart right here, and there's a mind right here. This is the first grouping of triads. This is the big triad. And that is the 8, the 9, and the 1 fall into what is called the body triad. These are more instinctual people. Again, you have all types within us, but these are people that live in their bodies. Their underlying struggle, so we're going to get real and we're going to highlight some things here. Their underlying struggle that they share is anger. That doesn't mean they're all the Hulk, ready to just rage, but it means that anger is there. It's represented differently in different types. For example, the type 8s, challenger, protector. This is the easiest person to type because they're often the most assertive, aggressive, loud. When they're angry, everybody knows it. Which, again, a powerful force for good when injustice happens. So it's not always a bad thing. Then 9, which is interesting because they're also within that gut type, anger triad. But 9s are some of the most peaceful, laid-back, conflict-avoidant people that you'll meet. They're easygoing. And sometimes, if they stuff down anger, that if it does bubble up, it's usually pretty ferociously. That's not even a word. It comes out big, all right? 1s, they try to be right. They're the reformer, the perfectionist, so they try to control their anger in that way. So moving along, the next we have the heart triad. Again, it's not saying nobody else has a heart. It's not like you're the Tin Man and Wizard of Oz if you're not here. But these are the ones that are most in touch with their emotions. Most heart. They're also the most image. I'm within the heart triad. They're the most image conscious ones, caring what other people think. Do they like me? What do they think of me? Do they think I'm successful? Do they not? Do they think I'm a helper? And how that shows is, of course, the 2, the helper and the giver. These are the most compassionate, giving, most extrovert, I want to help you people. They often know what people need before that person knows what they need. 3s is interesting. 3s are the achiever, the perfectionist. They're kind of disconnected from their emotions, often because they want to achieve. Their underlying, by the way, I didn't mention this, the underlying struggle between the heart 2, 3, and 4 is shame. And that's, again, because they're so concerned with what other people think that when they think other people might not like them, they feel inadequate. They feel like they don't measure up. And so the 2 copes with shame by going towards people. I really want you to like me. I really want you to need me. Look at how helpful I am. The 3 does that by, I want to achieve. So they'll take that shame that says I'm inadequate and I'm going to achieve. I'm going to not show them, but I'm going to find fulfillment through achieving things. The 4, this is my type. The 4 copes by focusing on how different they are than other people. They also struggle with feelings of inadequacy because they'll compare themselves, and they'll usually, not in a look at how good I am, but usually look at how bad I am. So, like when I look at Todd, and I think of how great of a singer he is. I wasn't pointing up for getting coffee. Where is this going? When I look at him, I'm like, oh my gosh, he has an amazing voice. You don't want to hear mine. And so the shame begins to creep in. I'm like, I wish I had his voice. That would be great. So that's a little bit about how the 4, 3, and 2 deals with that. The scripture verse for the 2, 3, and 4s is Proverbs 29:25. The fear of others lays a snare, but one who trusts in the Lord is secure. This idea that caring too much what other people think can be a trap. The scripture verse for the body type that I found is in Ephesians. It says, in your anger, don't sin. It's not wrong to be angry. In fact, 8s, 9s, and 1s they're some of the biggest advocates for injustice because they want to see justice and not see people experience oppression. Moving along. So now we're going in. This is going to be a lot of information. Just an introduction, just a tap. So begin to find which one you most resonate with. This is the head type, the 5, 6, and 7. They're the ones that most live in their head, but they're scanning usually. Looking, is it's safe? Are people safe? Is the environment safe? Do I know where the exits are? Is that person trying to control? Is that person safe? 5s, their underlying struggle is fear. Although again, originally they won't become, they're not necessarily aware of that. 5s cope with fear by withdrawing and trying to understand. Knowledge is power. They can come across sometimes as being the least emotional type, although they feel their emotions. But they tend to withdraw to try to understand. And once I understand, okay, now I feel like I have some competence. I feel safe. I feel secure. The 6 will cope with their fear by finding oftentimes an external source. Do I trust that person? Do I trust this group? Do I trust this institution? Do I trust this organization? Are they trustworthy? And finding that their fear often comes in the form of anxiety in that way. As quickly as possible and jumping to the next fun, great adventure. They're like the life of the party people. They're a lot of fun to be around. They often aren't aware of their fear, at least not for very long. They don't want to sit in any negative emotions for very long. They want to jump to the next thing, the next whatever it is. Let's have fun together. Scripture verse for this 5, 6, 7 type. Perfect love casts out fear. That once the 5, 6, and 7 settle into who they are, they experience unconditional love. Again, coming back to why we believe that everyone is a child of God, then that fear begins to subside. I can't help but think there are people around our nation that have experienced rejection in this last week, that fear is creeping in. I can't imagine. And it doesn't have to be just these types to experience that. So 2 more quick triads to help you. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of maybe which triad you're in. Then we have another way of dissecting it. And this is the assertive, withdrawn, or compliant types. Right? So you can already maybe, which one am I, just by those names, have some idea. So the assertive types, the most assertive, 3, 7, and 8. These are the types that aren't afraid to go towards people, to confront people, and sometimes even run over them if they need be. Right? They are the most assertive in their decisions. The withdrawn types, these are the least assertive types. That's the 4, the 5, and the 9. They move away from people. They don't like conflict. They have the hardest time being assertive or asserting themselves. They'll do what they can to avoid conflict, to move away from conflict. And the last, the compliant types. That is types 1, types 2, and type 6. These are the compliant types. They tend to, sometimes they don't have a big problem asserting themselves in some situations, and sometimes will withdraw. But it's not like they're constantly asserting themselves in most situations, nor are they constantly withdrawing from those situations. So maybe you could find yourself in those types. Am I assertive? A withdrawn? Do I withdraw from conflict? Or do I kind of stand my ground? Am I a compliant type? And the last triad here that we'll go through, the pragmatist, the rationalist, and the idealist. The pragmatist, it's hard to see, and I apologize. There's a center triangle here. And that is the 9, the 3, and the 6. They tend to be, if you look at your bulletin insert 2, they're the most practical oriented, the most down to earth. How do we get things done? 3s seek to be practical in how they're successful in achieving things. 6 are practical in establishing a safe and a secure role. 9s are practical in finding what is comfortable. I want to be comfortable, safe from conflict. The relationalist. Now, it sounds like they're the most relational personality. That doesn't necessarily mean the case. They're the ones that are more oriented towards either moving towards people or away from people. And that's the 2, the 5, and the 8. 2s are the most relational people because they're heart-centered. They want to help. they'll move towards people. 5, move away from people. Again, trying to understand what's going on. I want to grasp more knowledge. I need time to process things. So if you're one of those, it's like I don't know what I feel until I'm away and I'm processing it. We all have some of that. Then you might want to check out that type 5. And then lastly, the 8 moves to help people. They're the protectors. This is like the mama bear, right? You don't poke the cub. The mama bear comes out, right? These are kind of people that sometimes can be really intimidating, but when they're on your side are some of the greatest people to have because they will protect you. Again, they're in that gut triad, so justice is important to them. So hopefully, that was a lot of information. You all still with me?
Yeah. Idealist.
Idealist. Oh yes, thank you. I almost forgot. Idealist. 1, 4, and 7. These are the idealists, sometimes called the frustrated triad. Because as it sounds, when you're an idealist, you dream about something, but then reality doesn't usually meet that, and so you can grow. There's frustration. Now, 1s become frustrated because they have some of the highest internal standards. They want it to be right, to be done correctly, and they won't cut corners because they want that high standard. Only when others don't, when they lack, when something isn't met, it can be a little bit of frustration for them because they imagine what could be, right? 4s, we're sort of impractical dreamers, I guess, but we have this idea of everybody finding meaning and beauty and hope. And so in our minds we can think, oh, this would be great, and then reality comes and it doesn't quite meet that, and we begin to see all the things that don't quite meet. We see what's missing in things. 4 struggle to be content. I feel like I'm kind of exposing myself. I'm like, this is me. Out here. But they struggle, all of the idealists struggle with contentment, the 4s for sure. And the 7s struggle, they're the idealists. They imagine a world that's fun, that's exciting, where it's a big party. Let's hang out, let's have fun together, let's laugh together. And if things get too down, get too difficult, get too negative, they can get frustrated. Like, okay, let's go somewhere else. This isn't helpful. There's funner things going on somewhere else. So again, brief overview of the Enneagram. Last thing I'll say before I close this section, and hopefully there's some things churning in your mind that you're like, wow, this is a lot of information, digest it. The last thing, and if it's easier for you to look in your bulletin, there's numbers connecting all these types, and that's because your type, you act different when you're stressed or when you're integrated in health. And so the Enneagram has noticed, for example, the 9 who's more shy, not so assertive, doesn't always understand what they want. When they're really stressed, take on negative aspects of the 6. Self-doubt, uncertainty, ambiguity, oh my gosh, I don't know. But when they're in a healthy place, maybe with people they feel healthy, they feel secure, they move a little bit towards the 3, I can get some stuff done, I can step into that. So we'll be going along about each type, and we'll talk about what it looks like in health and disintegration and all of that, which is part of the Enneagram as well. All right, lots of information. I tried to fly through that. So that is the introduction to the Enneagram. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email anytime. Also, we have a small group coming up, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, March 6th plus 7 is 13th, right? March 13th? There you go. We're going to be following this book, The Road Back to You. We're going to order some. They'll be here next Sunday. If you would like a book, there's sign-ups back there. If you'd like to sign up for the small group, we'll be diving into this. I can't tell you how many times I've done, I recently did a small group for another church staff, and there were so many aha moments. Sometimes within them, but other times it was, oh, that's why my partner does that. They're this type. Or this is why my boss is like that and why we struggle sometimes. So it's always fun, I think, to look at those and to examine kind of people's motivations. It's not meant to be used as a weapon to kind of weaponize from somebody else, but for self-awareness and hopefully understanding who you are and who you were created to be. I think we have somebody who is going to be reading for us today. Possibly Micah?
The heavens and the earth. But the earth became chaos and emptiness, and darkness came over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was brooding over the surface of the waters.
Then God said, "Light be," and light was. God saw that light was good, and God separated light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. Evening came and morning followed the first day.